You're listening to Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong, all on Georgia Radio Network.
Welcome to episode 124 of the Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong podcast. I'm Dave Roberts. With me is the blonde bomber, writer, journalist, TV personality, Jessica Szilagyi.
Hello. Blonde bomber? What's that about?
Oh, I don't know. It's like a boxing moniker for you.
I'll take it.
The Statesboro Slaughterer.
No. Don't start that.
That one might stick.
Yeah. I don't... No. Just don't even go down there.
How was your week?
It was fine.
Yeah.
How was yours?
Busy. I tell you what, I wish I could take the summer that we have, the real intense summer, and spread that work out for 52 weeks. Because that would be comfortable. It's just one after the other, and it's getting up early, and like I said last week, I'm a totally different person, like on the clock. So I'm yelling at people, trying to get materials and labor at the right place at the right time. It's a different kind of stressful than when I was working for somebody else. It's a stressful of if people don't show up when I say they're going to show up, it makes me a liar. So it's good. You know, friction keeps the blade sharp. It's definitely summertime in Georgia.
Is there anywhere where you, like, I mean, I had friends who would run their AC in the winter, but is there any place where you would work year round at the same rate you do now?
South Florida.
I guess that's true, yeah.
Because the humidity sticks around South Florida. You just have to deal with being in South Florida with all the New York transplants. I mean, I know. I mean, that's home.
Yeah, true.
Or it was. Or, I mean, you have places where you have more intense winters, and summer's not that big of a deal. You know, you go to Montana, and a lot of them don't even have air conditioners. For the 1 week that it's hot, you open the windows and deal with it. But, you know, I complain when there's no work, and I complain when there's too much work. I guess I just bitch about anything.
Typical man.
Well, we do want to say we hope everyone had a very safe and wonderful Independence Day.
Might be the last
and
one
we
we
hope.
get.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what's going to be next? Dependence Day?
Not funny.
Yeah, we're just wait for the next check to roll out. Bring that stimulus. It's Dependence Day. Woo!
Oh God,
And
I don't want that.
I walked through Walmart today and saw them stocking up on 70-inch TVs. I'm like, they're expecting the next stimulus check to come out.
That's terrible. You know, I do think it's interesting how the different sides, political parties have been painting this unemployment and just the jobs situation, because, you know, Democrats say that no matter what, people need more money, and Republicans say that, you know, it's keeping people out of work, which I think most reasonable people who make a good living or a decent living think that it's enough to keep people out of work. And the Republicans want to, instead of giving a stimulus or unemployment benefits, they want to incentivize people to go back to work and give them a bonus, and then shout, you know, look at this surge and this we're booming and all this. And it's like, it's literally just people going back to work because you've opened up the economy. It's neither. It's neither side. What either side is saying is not true.
I think the president gets too much credit and too much blame for unemployment numbers. Now, absolutely, there are things that you can do by cutting regulation, cutting taxes that will be business friendly and allow business to spend more money and hire more people. But I don't think that Bill Clinton was responsible for the boom in the 90s. I don't think that George W. Bush is responsible for the recession. And I don't think Obama is responsible for the collapse in 2008 or the slow recovery. I think they get too much credit and too much blame for it all the way around, and so that's getting off on a hog trail on that one. But all business needs is the government to get the hell out of the way, and we'll do the rest.
Right.
So, as far
Speaking
as
of government not getting out of the way,
we've got Georgia Legislative Roundup, Part D. These have been approved by both chambers and sent to the governor's desk. The Military Spouse Bill, Heath Clark, has the House Bill HB 914, which passed 165 to 0.
Yeah, I gave it a red, but no one listened to me. Because we talked about this early on, I think it was one of the first bills, even though it has a high bill number, it was one of the first ones to be filed, and we talked about all of the military bills again, I think even last year when Matt was still on the show. But this one just prioritizes and expedites licensing, transfers, reciprocity, and processing of spouses who are transferred to the state because of a deployment or because of a reassignment or whatever the case may be. I gave it a red because, thank you for your husband or wife's service to the country, but if I'm in line to get a license, why do you get to go ahead of me? Like, I might have just moved here too. I wasn't a fan, but, it's unpopular to do that, and it passed unanimously in the Senate. The House version actually wasn't the final one to pass. This exact bill was sent by Bruce Thompson in the Senate, and it was the one to gain final passage, but it's the same bill, so...
So we're talking about a hairdresser that may have been, her husband or his wife gets transferred from Fort Sill to Columbus and waiting in line to get a cosmetology license. And that person will go to the front of the line to get that license. I don't see how that's any different from somebody who works in Salt Lake City for Delta and is transferred to Atlanta, and his or her spouse having a professional license and I'm not a huge fan of the professional licenses anyway. I don't think either one of us are, even though I'm in a licensed industry and the licenses protect me as far as protect my income and protect my company from having hacks do stuff. But I don't see the difference because neither person necessarily made a choice in that. I'm with you. Like I said, we were talking before the show. This is not a hill I'm going to die on. The fact that it went 165 to 0 shows that no one could be seen voting against this.
I would have.
Well, of course you would, because you're a person of principle.
Again, they get so much flack for voting no all the time, which is really not even that much, but I get it. It's the least harm that they did all session, I'll say that.
Yeah, 20% is considered being a contrarian.
Yeah.
8 out of 10 yes is being a contrarian. I think we talked about that with Gertler.
Well, and I'm working on that right now. I'll have that in the next 2 weeks or so, the annual, who voted no the most, who skipped the most votes. So we'll talk about that in a couple weeks. But
and you know what? If I'm sitting up there, I don't know whether I'm voting for it or not. I probably would have. I think it's the least offensive thing they did this year, including the budget. It's just one of those things that it's just not worth the fight on that one. And 165 to 0 means people who are already going home voted for it. Like, they weren't even worried about their constituents. They were already going home, voted for it. So, moving on. Foster parent DFACS reforms. Nothing substantial other than allows them to get short-term babysitters Add language to allow DFACS to require training for foster parents doable online. And free admission to state parks.
Yeah, so there were a couple DFACS and foster parent bills this session. One in the House was super comprehensive by Burt Reeves, who's the one who has pushed them in the past and successfully done so, but it made it through the House, and then the Senate never took it up, and so there were some smaller bills that individually addressed it. And, when this was going through committee, I didn't know that if you're a foster parent, you can't have a babysitter. It's prohibited. You're not allowed to let someone else care for the kid. So obviously, this isn't about like giving the parents a night out, or, it is, but it's not about like being rowdy and out on the town. It's about the fact that, like, especially in these times, you can't always take a kid to a doctor's appointment or things like that. And you may not be able to leave them with your spouse or a sibling or something. So I had no idea that this was such an issue. I didn't love the DFACS training requirements for parents, but like I imagine it's just a PowerPoint that you have to click through and then at the end say, I get it. And there's other checks and balances for foster parents anyway. But again, it wasn't a deal breaker.
I don't have a problem with the online training because I don't think it's training on how to take care of a kid. I think it's training so that you understand the regulations that you're signing on to. For instance, from being a gun guy, it is fairly restrictive to be a gun guy and have a foster kid. Like, I think one of the things you signed is that you agreed never to allow that child to handle a firearm, even supervised on a range, take him hunting. At one point, because we looked at adopting. One point reading through there, it was fairly restrictive. You've got to keep all your ammunition and firearms separate all the time. Even the piece that you keep in your quick drop safe next to your bed, technically is supposed to be separated from the ammunition. But the training online to know that you understand the laws, so that you're not going to have this kid ripped away from you because you violated some obscure law that you didn't know about, and then further traumatize a child that's been thrown into the system. And I'm married to a foster child. Not a child now. That'd be pretty creepy.
Oh God, Dave.
But it is very traumatic to lose your parents, be thrown into the system, and then you find a semi-stable home and then be ripped away from that home because they violated some stupid DFACS rules. So at least some sort of training would be, I assume, a disclosure for those parents. As far as free admission to state parks, whatever.
Well, we already give them, the state gives them stipends to care for the kids and for food. There's all kinds of benefits that come along with certain degrees of foster parents, but back to the training, one of the reasons that I was against it was because the way that the language is written, it could be arbitrary, like only some people are required to take it, and I just thought that it should be something that is either like everyone has to do it, or unless you've done it unless you've been a foster parent before and your grandfather did or something, I just felt like it should be direct enough that it would apply to everyone. But I'm with you on what you said makes total sense.
Yeah, the babysitter thing blows my mind.
Yeah,
and I think you hit the nail on the head. Again, violating the name of the show with the COVID thing. If you have, and I know a person who has a foster kid has 3 kids of his own. Well, if dad's at work, mom's at home, one of the kids is sick, well, you can't take all 3 kids to the doctor. So you've got to have some sort of care. And the short-term babysitter, I understand the idea behind prohibiting it is that they don't want, but the government tends to overcorrect, and prohibition against short-term babysitting is not exactly the way to keep them from just dropping the kid off at their dealer's house when they get high. Well, we got Georgia Broadband Opportunity Act, and we'll pause for laughing noises.
I actually put the laughing noises on my bill analysis for the lawmakers because I was like, this is hilarious that you're calling it the Opportunity Act and it's more regulation. I gave it a big old red, but of course it passed. It had some dissent though, so that was good. But basically, it's tax on more of the pole access with EMCs and partnering with broadband companies and how they comply with federal regulations and how they are actually it defines like how they can be competitive and what commercially reasonable terms are, and then it assigns the Public Service Commission as the enforcer of these regulations, which is interesting because was it on the show we were talking about how EMCs aren't regulated the same way that Georgia Power was?
I'm sure. And here's the thing about anything with broadband in the name. There are so many reps and senators out there that are campaigning on broadband access. We've got one out here that when he was running kept on talking about kids having to go down to, we have a Chevron McDonald's, share the same building. They call it the Chevronalds, and having to go down to the Chevronalds to do homework because they just don't have fast enough internet at their homes. And I'm sure down where you are, and across the state, certainly outside of what you consider Metro Atlanta and any other metro area, that's a really big selling point to the constituents. Is I want to make sure you get access to fast internet.
Yeah, it's just I just don't see how more regulation is going to make that happen. And last year they passed some other initiatives, and one of them was you can't cross subsidize. So if you're an EMC provider and you have the infrastructure on the poles for telecommunications, you can't cross subsidize between each company. So basically what they're saying is that you can't use investments from your EMC company to fund the broadband, but these companies don't have the cash to just transfer. And I mean, it takes money to make money is the reality.
And what was your problem? What was your problem down there for
here,
so long? It was
the right-of-way rights by my county were sold to one company for a certain amount of time, so another company couldn't come out here, which makes it so that the crappy company has no incentive to provide better service because there's no alternative. And so they don't have to have strong lines or, I was like 5 miles from the box, which means your service is just, I mean.
Yeah, and that was what was shocking to me. And I think this was show one or two that we did together. I mean, when I first came on, it's like you had high-speed internet on the other side of the road. Like if you picked up your house and moved to the other side of the road, you'd have had access to high-speed internet, but they couldn't give it to you because the county sold the right-of-way to somebody else.
Yes, and literally across the road, the people across the road from me had the telephone co-op, and I had Frontier. And it wasn't until somebody who is part owner in the telephone co-op moved 4 properties down, which is about a mile, maybe a mile and a half. He moved in, and they were able to. And it was about the time that the release was up. I'm on a corner, and on one road they were able to run it on that road because it went to his house, and the company was willing to make the investment, obviously, because he is the company. And on the other side, so instead of putting it in the right of way where all of the other infrastructure is, they put it in the different area. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like, if I want to have that, if I would have wanted to pay for that company to run a line 5 miles from my house to the box, I should have been able to do that if I went to contract with the company.
So we got 44 House no votes, 22 no votes in the Senate.
Which isn't enough.
I mean, I have to take my shoes off to count, but I think that's less than 50%.
So, last week, too, right after the legislature adjourned, Governor Kemp announced that the Department of Community Affairs had launched this map. It's an interactive map to show, based on population and county and different things, who in Georgia is without internet at all and who is basically like underserved with unreliable internet. And of course, I think it's really neat because I'm living where I live. I mean, I'm well aware of the impacts of this, and some of the campaigns I've worked in this area, I mean, they're getting internet from a satellite. So I understand that it's without it, it's lacking infrastructure that keeps these counties below par. But I mean, what's the point of the website? They're like, thank you for telling us. I think they knew, and the people who don't have internet can't look at the website. I don't know. I mean, it's a neat tool,
I think that's a shock thing. Is for people who do have good internet is to be able to reference that and go, yeah, but look at everybody without. So you need Sally Struthers like kneeling next to a kid with a broken computer going, for just the price of a cup of coffee a day, you can provide little Johnny with internet.
I agree. I mean, I understand. I just, there was money appropriated to that, and it came from an act of the legislature and a direction of Kemp, and it's just like, come on, y'all. Stop it.
Well, let's talk about boobs. HB 1114 requires Medicaid coverage of lactation services and care.
Yeah, so we've talked about the lactation consultant licensing in the state. There was a huge lawsuit over it too, but good old Sharon Cooper wants to require Medicaid coverage for lactation services and care, which if you hadn't mandated the lactation consultants to become licensed in the first place, you wouldn't have to mandate the coverage. But whatever. I mean, whatever. What friggin' people. Animals teach their young to breastfeed.
They also have a higher than human infant mortality rate. But the idea of someone who in any other century or millennia of human existence would be your mama, the baby's grandmama, an older sister, a friend who would help you out. The state of Georgia thinks that we need to give a license to someone who to give you the encouragement needed, which is absurd. And I understand that I've never breastfed any babies.
Oh,
and yeah, I know you're amazed by that.
Mm-hmm.
But and this is going back a couple years on the show. I think we talked about lactation consultants being licensed, which is just absurd. I mean, you talk to Brad Raffensperger, and he's going to tell you how busy his office is and how covered up they are and how he wants to deregulate. And now we've got crap like that.
I don't believe him, first of all.
Do what?
The office gets money from that. I don't believe them.
Well, of course. His lips are moving.
Yeah.
There was one no vote on it.
Gertler.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Gertler voted no on something? We like Matt Gertler. We wish him the best in his runoff on August 11th.
Yeah, you're damn right, because the people in Atlanta are having a fit over it.
You know what I like about Gertler going to Washington?
Tell me.
He is going to hate every damn moment of it.
Oh, sure.
He's not going to relish this, walk down and just go, ooh, I can smell the power. He is going to hate every moment of it. and everybody up there is going to hate him, and it's going to be just wonderful because he's going to be the person that's not going to be pushed around by the party. But anyway, I guess this requires postpartum care for new mothers for 6 months after giving birth. Direct state agencies to apply for a plan amendment for the U.S. HHS if necessary to implement.
Basically, that's a consolation prize for the abortion bill last year. Like, hey, we're going to force you to have your kid, so here's 6 months of postpartum care if you have Medicaid. Hope that helps.
Well, so we also have. Well, no, I'm not. Without getting into it, you also have adoption. I mean,
I know, but we don't. You don't. I mean, there's nothing in the bill that gives that postpartum care to moms who didn't give birth.
Well, that's true.
So I
mean,
it
wouldn't be postpartum, would it?
Well, no, but I mean, if the argument is that you got to support mothers, I mean, that's what this was sold on.
It's always it. So we have HB 1039 by Representative Sam Watson.
Yeah, this
requires sellers for any contract selling or leasing any service to a consumer if the contract is 24 months or more to meet both of these standards. What are they?
So there has to be written or electronic acknowledgement from the consumer that they received notification about it, if it's going to auto-renew. Or there has to be written or electronic response indicating that the consumer does not intend to terminate the contract. So basically, if a consumer, like, this is just another law to say that, you know, the government's going to protect you if you don't read the contracts that you're supposed to read when you buy or sell something or rent it to somebody.
So this would be gyms?
Yep. Housing.
Well, you know, with gyms have been a scam for a long time. You know, they push around the new year, and their favorite member never shows up. They get that $20 a month membership, or whatever it is, and it auto renews, and it is such a pain in the ass to cancel.
Yes, and you have to do it by a certain date, or else you have to pay for one more month. I mean, it's ridiculous. But
it is.
That's in the contract.
Right. No, absolutely. It's a private contract. And I'm not saying there should be a law about it, but this is the problem that they're trying to address. Is the only thing I could think that the state would even have control over would be like gym memberships and things like that, because the state doesn't have control over those apps that you buy, you know, Babbel or whatever else that you buy that automatically renews, and you have to send them 3 different copies because the state doesn't have any authority over those because it's international or it's interstate. So why do the legislators hate gyms? Is
why
that why
do
they're
they
all out
hate
of shape?
Georgians? You know, everyone's talking about like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm so offended. I want to get rid of this. Well, I've been offended by the Georgia legislature since at least 2012, and nobody's tried to get rid of them.
You would rather have a dictatorial governor?
No, I don't want either right now. I just want to be by myself for a while and see how it works.
Government, look, it's not you, it's me.
Yeah,
I need to work on myself. Exactly. I need to work on myself. I need to be alone for a while. We're going to stick a pin in this, and let's both agree to oppress other people. So we have the failed to pass.
So
agricultural.
Go ahead.
No, you said no. Agricultural nuisance bill. They don the Right to Farm Act for public reasons when it didn't pass in 2019.
We talked about this one last year, and then we talked about, I think we briefly mentioned it, that it was going to be back on the table this year, but we didn't really get into it because it was on the Senate side. This was the one where the rules chairman at the time in the House was like, oh, yeah, there's some big problems with it, but we'll just fix it in the Senate, which is a terrible way to do legislation. But basically, this was the one that pitted small private property owners against farmers, because the Georgia Farm Bureau and some other lobbying organizations sold it as, lawmakers want to protect your right to farm, but really what they were trying to do was take away a smaller private property owner's ability to sue in court if something becomes a nuisance, whether it be a smell or runoff or pollution or just general infringement. Once that property owner has had the property for 1 year, they no longer could sue under the bill. Then the second in the Senate, they tried to make it 2 years, and they tried to make it so that, if you were within a 5-mile radius, you could still sue within 2 years, when the law for, I think, like 30 years has been you file a complaint or an injunction for that there's a nuisance or something that's hurting your property. You go before a judge weighs it and decides. I feel like that's the right way that it should be. It protects both parties. If you're wronged, they pay you. The judge will order them to pay. And if you're the farmer who's been wronged, they'll pay your legal fees because that'll be part of the order. We already have all these things in place. This was just a way to appease corporate farms, and so I was really glad to see it fail.
Yeah, and last year we discussed it, is you may not know the damage to your property for a year or even 2 years. Especially when you start talking about soil leaching and things like that. You may not actually realize the damage that's happening to your property for that period of time. So yeah, it is a good fail. We've got Airbnb short-term rental regulations for local governments.
Right. So this one was a Senate bill, 162. It passed out of the Senate, passed out of House Committee, passed out of Rules, but then got sent back to Rules and never made it any further. But they wanted to pass a state law that said local governments are allowed to regulate short-term rentals like Airbnb and VBRO, and if it's less than 30 days, but that local governments would not be allowed to prohibit the practice at all. So this was an interesting one because, there's cities all over the place that have outlawed Airbnb. We've talked about them. And then there's some that have regulated them so heavily that it has prohibited them. And that was part of the language in here. It said, you can't prohibit them and you can't regulate them so much that it's impossible to operate them because of the strict regulations. I don't know how I feel about it failing, though.
Well, on face value, it was a decent bill, which tells local governments you can't get between a property owner and a private contract.
Right. I don't know. I agree with you. I just would hate for the legislature to come back and continue to fine tune it, which is what they always do. They never just leave it alone.
It's a scab. Keep picking it. It'll get better.
Ugh.
So we have the Campus Free Speech Act, SB 318 by Senator William Ligon.
This is
Is it Ligon?
Ligon's right. Yep. Nope, Ligon's right. This is something that's come up a few times in the past couple years and has still not passed, but basically on University System of Georgia and technical college campuses around the state, it would make it so that those institutions could not make free speech zones in outdoor areas, because on campus right now you go to any given campus and they'll tell you, if you want to have a gathering, they'll tell you, well, you can't do it there because that's not allowed. You can't gather on that field. You can't go here on that sidewalk. You've got to go to the free speech zone, which is teaching children that government dictates where free speech happens. And so anyway, it prohibited that. It eliminated the free speech zones so that they can put some restrictions in, but it has to be something that's like neutral, doesn't discriminate based on viewpoint, is published and clear and applies to everyone, and has to be significant to the interests. So, I'm assuming that, like, if there was, I don't know, I can't think of an example, but something maybe where, you can't
protest. Yeah, you can't block access to the library. You can't disrupt student activities. You can't protest the at the football game and keep patrons from going inside. All the reasonable restrictions on the First Amendment that have been in place for a couple hundred years now. That you absolutely have a right to petition your government and to be heard, but you don't have the right to infringe on anyone else's rights. So if you can't go block Main Street, you can't go block the connector. So those are all reasonable restrictions on the First Amendment that we say that you can't infringe on anybody else's right to get to their education because you're protesting. So I
know that the Board of Regents feels otherwise, but all of this is state property, so
the Board of Regents can, whatever. They can wash my feet. But yeah, I don't really care what the Board of Regents wants. So, but yeah,
and all God's people said,
yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. These are our opinions, and not necessarily those of All on Georgia, and certainly not those of any All on Georgia reporter not offering commentary on this show. So we're going to try to get to a couple things real quick. The 2-year anniversary of the Georgia hands-free law. 3 months after it did, the law's lead sponsor, John Carson, said the Hands-Free Georgia Act was all about saving lives, and I believe that's exactly what it is doing. I sincerely hope these life-saving trends continue for the benefit and safety of all Georgians and their families.
Yeah. He's a liar. He also tried to
refer to my previous statement. These are our opinions. Go ahead. Sorry, Jess.
I mean, it's not an opinion. That's a fact. He lied because he said this quote is, he did say that, but in another press conference, before it even was enacted, like it was between the time it was passed and signed and then took effect, he said that it was already saving lives because people knew it was coming down the pipeline, and that's not true. In 2018, fewer people died than in 2019, and 2020 is on track to have more traffic fatalities than the years past, even with the shutdown and everything. And ironically, but not that surprisingly, the 2 years leading up to this law being enacted, we were actually on the first downward trend in like a decade. So we were doing something else. I think it's because people aren't staring at their crotch trying to hide their phone. They had it up on their steering wheel and they'd be looking through the phone, and that may not be right. I'm certainly not defending distracted driving in that context, but John Carson is a liar.
There are too many variables to actually put this into one box as to why there are more fatalities, why there are fewer fatalities. It is shocking to me considering our 3-month shutdown. Look, traffic in Atlanta was damn pleasant for 3 months with all those non-essential SOBs off the road. Look, I could get to Atlanta and back. And it just at highway speed, go do what I do, come back when this was going on. And now that everybody's going back to work, all the a-holes are back on the road. But I will tell you that I agree with you in so do like experts in automobiles agree that when you have to hide what you're doing, when you have to put the phone down in the cup holder, you have to stare down in the cup holder now to see what you're looking at anyway, versus you have peripheral vision, you have parallax vision. You can see, without focusing on one thing, you can see what's going on around you. So be able to pick the phone up and it's simple things like, who's calling? Do I need to answer this? Is, I'm not going to say safer, less dangerous than looking down, putting the phone between your legs and having to look at it, like you said, staring at your crotch, or anything like that. But the bill is so absurd that even having the phone routed through your vehicle and then touching the phone that's connected to the information that's connected to the internet on your vehicle is illegal. I mean, it's absurd. But what has it done for the state?
Cha-ching.
24,862 tickets to drivers. This is Georgia State Patrol only. It does not include city and county agencies across the state. Atlanta PD issued 17,043 during the same period.
That's only the first year.
That's Atlanta by itself is 75%, and that's guerrilla math off the top of my head. 75% of what the Georgia State Patrol has done over the entire state.
Yeah. And I wanted you mentioned something a minute ago, and I just want to touch on it because you said there's so many factors on why traffic accidents are up. And I mean, you're absolutely right, because speed and people not wearing seatbelts and impaired driving, all those things, I would not discredit that. The only reason that I feel like the numbers are so important is because John Carson said that they had already started to decline. And then in his op-ed in the beginning of this year, he actually said that they were down. And the governor's Office of Highway Safety has long been the kind of go-to record keeper for those things, because they keep up with Georgia State Patrol and all the agencies, and they say otherwise. And so that's why I feel like it's important. I totally agree.
No, and I would say the same thing if the numbers supported what he said. Is there are way too many factors to credit this law with hypothetically dropping the number of fatalities. There are too many X factors that are out there. There's way too many variables for him to take credit. Just like we're kind of we were BSing before we got into the meat of the show about the president gets too much blame and too much credit for the economy. There are too many X factors that go out there. So for him to try to champion, I'm saving lives with this legislation, it makes him a tremendous D-bag. Because I hope he's smart enough, and I know I've said that if you put 200 legislators in a room, you couldn't get 100 IQ between them. But you think somebody... you would think that he would be sophisticated enough to know that it's not a 1 + 2 = 3 equation. Are you okay?
No, I'm great. I want that to be the opening for every segment next legislative session.
So, we've got Van Johnson. Oh, Mayor Van. He issued a decree that everyone in Savannah must wear a mask when in public. And I think he allowed a couple carve-outs for religious and medical purposes. And I think his fine that he decided that he would dictate was something like $500.
Yes, it's a civil infraction.
Right. So, and of course, this flies in the face of Kemp's executive order, which preempts any local government action. And Kemp says he is not taking the idea of overturning Savannah's mask mandate, while he urges the use across Georgia. Wow.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. First of all, it's not the governor's authority to say he's going to override or not override. His executive order already preempts any local government. It's not up to. I mean, he can decide whether or not to say anything about it. He can decide whether or not to have the GBI do anything about it. But he doesn't have the authority outside of issuing another executive order rescinding his original to do that. I mean, am I wrong here?
No. I mean, and also I think that somebody has to like a citizen or somebody who doesn't necessarily have to be a citizen, because I am not a citizen and I would go to Savannah and be subject to it. So, but I think as an individual has to bring a claim.
Right,
well.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. And we were talking before the show. If Kemp allows this, Van already has expressed an interest in passing his own local gun ordinances. And Georgia has said that local municipalities may not supersede Georgia gun law. So Paulding County can't make it illegal to carry in a Paulding County park. When the state of Georgia says, as long as I have a Georgia weapons permit or license, I can carry in any park. So the municipality can't do that. If the governor allows Johnson to get away with asserting his own independence, his own sovereignty as a city over the preemption of the state, that's opening the door to cities like Savannah passing their own concealed carry or any sort of gun ordinance or any other ordinance they want to do, and say, look, well, you didn't say anything when we did it with COVID and masks. You established the modus operandi here.
I mean, I would love nothing more than for Van Johnson to get slapped around on this, because he's been pushing it since the beginning. I mean, he and a couple others, but his actions in the beginning of all of this are why the governor added that to his executive orders in the first place, because they were so out of control. But
he's been out of control. He is an egomaniac. He is an absolute piece of garbage executive. He was an egomaniac when he was, what do they call him, alderman down there, or city councilman?
Mm-hmm. Alderman.
He was a garbage alderman. He is a garbage mayor, and the people of Savannah deserve what they elected, because all the evidence was there that he was a piece of trash before this. He's a liar. He's a cheat. And he is he is an egomaniac who thinks that he knows better than anybody else what's good for everybody, down to whether or not you should wear a mask when walking in public. He thinks that he knows better whether or not that you should carry a pistol on you to protect yourself in the bad areas of Savannah. He knows better than the state legislators. Well, I mean, maybe I do, but he knows better than state law. Yeah, he's going to dictate what happens in Savannah. And he can kiss my ass. Because it'll be quite a while before I drop another nickel in that city. Again, these are our opinions, not necessarily those of all in Georgia. Jessica, you want to get to closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on a kick. There's always this conversation about consolidating counties or getting rid of the number of counties because our constitution says that our state constitution says we can have no more than 159. Not that we have to have 159. And the conversation has always been, well, let's consolidate some South Georgia counties and then split Fulton up and make it Fulton and Milton. Or there's been lots of dialogues about that, but I really want to talk about getting rid of some cities. And I don't think a lot of people realize how much damage cities do, but I want to talk about that in an episode or two. Maybe we can get a municipal voice on here to be a counterpoint, but I'm ready to can them.
Absolutely. Especially the cities that just barely meet the 3. We offer trash, water, and in like a 1-person police department. It's an interesting thought. It will be an interesting conversation. Stay tuned. So I got something totally related to politics or anything else. I went to my nephew's baseball game together. They are 7, and they're in coach pitch, and it's just they call it the Sandlot League because so many kids are going on vacation, but you just kind of just sign up week by week. And I wish we had a video camera going. I witnessed an unassisted triple play, which is the rarest play in sports. It is where one person gets 3 outs at one time. As it typically was, it was a shortstop, caught the ball, out, stepped on the bag because there was a runner going from second to third, out, and the runner coming from first, tagged out. Now, these are 7-year-olds, so it's not all that impressive because they're all kind of running around and bumping into each other anyway. But with COVID right now and no sports on TV, they are literally televising cornhole. If we had a video going, it would be on damn Sports Center. And I wish we did. So so totally unrelated to politics. I got to witness a unassisted triple play in person. We then took them out for Mexican. Yeah, we then took them out for Mexican food. Now it was late getting started on the podcast. We were taping tonight and made you wait for me. So, for Jessica Szilagyi, for Eric Cumby, our editor, I'm Dave Roberts. Have a great week.